All team, give it everything you got!
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
I don't think there's anything more important in the Star Wars universe than the fans.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
With your hosts, Teresa Delgado, Tricia Barr, and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Welcome, Yub Cubs, to Fangirls Going Rogue. I'm your host, Teresa Delgado, and with me, as always, are my fangirl friends in the force, Sarah Woloski from Skywalking Through Neverland. Celebration is super close. Are you excited?
Very excited, very nervous, and I keep on biting down my fingernails, even though I have nail polish on them, because it's like there's so much to do, and it helps me focus.
No, I feel you. I feel you. Tricia Barr from Fangirl Blog. What about you? I mean, you're in North Carolina right now. You've got just a few days to get back and then go to California.
Yeah, it's going to be a whirlwind, but that's the only way to do it.
I guess so. I won't be there, but I just saw the news about the Star Wars live stage. So I'm excited for that because I'll be able to see something. I don't know what, but something. So that'll be pretty cool. And also, for all of you listening right now, make sure you stay tuned to the very end of the show for a very special announcement. Okay, but guys, first of all, Obi-Wan Kenobi is almost here. Like, I'm excited for that. You guys, it's going to come out right on the Friday of celebration for y'all. And for me, I'm like, I get to rewatch it as much as I want. And so I'm like, what's y'all's plan to watch Obi-Wan? You know, wake up, be up at midnight?
I don't know. I probably will be up at midnight. Let's see. Thursday night is the 501st bash. I have not bought tickets to that. Tricia, have you? No? Okay.
No.
Yeah, we actually might take off that night. So maybe we'll watch it at midnight. Sounds like a plan.
Well, yeah, y'all's schedule's going to be super packed. All right, well, we did have, I guess they called it the final trailer that came out just a few days ago. And we got our first clips at Vader. I mean, we didn't see his face or anything. We saw a helmet, a chest plate, and like basically him getting plugged in.
And the breathing. Always the breathing.
Oh, yeah. Always the breathing. Asthmatic breathing at its best. Did you guys have any favorite parts of that last little trailer that we got?
I just love the sense of things closing in Kenobi, just like everything felt claustrophobic. And just that you felt like Reva opens the dialogue and it ends with her. The last dialogue is her yelling. And she's like, you can't escape him. And then they show Vader, the chest plate, not, we can use our imaginations. But you get the sense like everything's like the Inquisitors are always coming at you on the screen. So that's this way of just like really putting in Kenobi's perspective, like I'm not the aggressor. I'm not the one on top this time. I'm the hunted and the prey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think it's from this trailer. Maybe it was from the original one, but I really like the line where Obi-Wan says something to Owen Lars about like he has to be trained or something. And he says, like you did with his father. And I was like,
yeah, that's this trailer, and that's the shade of all shades in Star Wars.
Leave us alone.
When the time comes, he must be trained.
Like you trained his father?
Yeah, I think someone posted a meme that said, I talked to the creators or I talked to Lucasfilm and was like, yeah, I don't really have a whole story yet, but this is my pitch. And it was like that one line. And they're like, greenlit. I thought that was funny. Well, I love that they call it a 6-part event. Like, I think that is a great marketing technique, and it blurs the line between TV and cinema, as we're going to kind of talk about a little more later with animation and cinema. But I feel like everything about these past two trailers have really pointed to the fact that this is a cinematic experience, whether you're watching on a TV screen or in a theater. And I actually hope they'll make it available theatrically. Like, how cool would that be? Some limited run theatrical ways to see this.
The 6-part event reminds me of back in the day when we had the mini series on ABC, where you'd have like the Thornbirds, a 6-part event. It sort of tells you that maybe it's going to take 6 parts for you to get it. Like, it's just not going to be this like episode that you're going to always be like, more, like it's going to be a 6-hour movie but they have to play it out in 6 parts.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think the 6-part or part event thing that I remember the most was From the Earth to the Moon on HBO that Tom Hanks did, when it was like a 12-part event situation, but it was like that, where it wasn't like episodes. It was like everything just rolled into the next one type of thing.
That's cool.
So now the press tour has started, and they are currently in London right now, I believe, and we've already started to get some really awesome pictures, but also some memes that have popped up. I saw this one that you guys posted where Hayden and Ewan are looking at each other with the "I love you, I know" bubbles on either side of their
we
head.
had to thank Joey Pittman for posting that one. I saw it there first, and he's great with sharing some fun memes.
Well, there's definitely a bromance vibe from their, just them talking about, they worked and trained so hard, and they get to kind of go back and be friends again. And I love just seeing them happy to talk about Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. And then with Moses Ingram with them, and like, she just looks fancy. Every picture you see with her, she's like just this fashion icon statement between 2 boys in like suits. Not really suits, but just like jackets and pants. Although, what is with Ewan's pants in one of these pictures? Like, it's like, dude, you're wearing high waters with white socks. Like, I don't understand it, but okay.
The high, I guess that's coming back. Maybe
It's like capris almost for men, which is weird.
And they're definitely doing sort of a kind of a style thing where Hayden's sort of Darth Vader-ish. And I know a lot of people are making fan art even of his first outfit in Berlin.
Oh.
And then Hayden's on the dark side, and Ewan's got either white or a lighter tan color he was rocking. And then Moses Ingram's in these beautiful grays and the hot pink, which sort of lends to it's like they make their outfits so they almost speak to what their character is when you watch these press events. I remember like the Eternals, they had all like, they were color kind of aligned with their character. So we're going to talk a little bit about animation tonight and film. And I was thinking about Kenobi and the character, and my favorite moment ever for Obi-Wan Kenobi is in Star Wars Rebels. And do you guys know what moment that is?
When Kenobi goes off, or Darth Maul goes and visits Tatooine.
Twin Sons.
There you go.
Yeah, you know what though? I'm curious if Ewan has ever seen those scenes of Rebels, because I think that would be, I don't know, really useful for him. We're going to talk about this too, about, Rebels and Clone Wars having an impact on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But I'm curious if he's seen those.
Well, so Twin Sons, let's just explain it really quickly, is the Rebels episode where Darth Maul figures out where Kenobi is and goes to have a final confrontation with him. Because of course, Kenobi was the one who split him in half and, made his life go to hell.
Rude.
Basically. So
turned him into a spider.
Yes. So he goes to Tatooine to have vengeance. And then in A New Hope, we see Ben Kenobi, but we don't see Maul. So I guess we know how that turned out.
I'm pretty sure everyone knows at this point. If you don't know, like, Maul is now officially dead.
Yeah, well, back in the day when they resurrected him and everybody's like, he's dead, right? Even George Lucas said he's cut in half. That's, he's dead. And then he's like, no, I'll bring him back for some animation. I need a cool character. But they kind of needed to close that door so that Kenobi's, because they sort of unended that arc, because that was his step to being a Jedi Knight. And then they're like, oh no, he's not really dead. So just the way that it ended, it was just one of those scenes where it wasn't what you expected, but it proved to be everything you needed. That Maul was so filled with hate and rage and vengeance, and he's screaming Kenobi's name, voiced by Sam Witwer, who did an amazing job. And it's just like 3 slashes, I think, and Kenobi's just bested him. But it's also this really cool moment because it creates the reason you could see Kenobi going off world, because he actually leaves Luke to go out and confront Maul. He goes out to protect Ezra Bridger, who's the lead of Star Wars Rebels. And I just think, in thinking about how they had to pull so many threads in that little animated segment to serve Ezra's story, to serve Maul's story, to serve Kenobi's story. And it was just so beautifully cinematically. And to think that that's one of my favorite moments in Star Wars. And I think that leads perfectly into the discussion we're going to have. And we kind of wanted to have discussion about animation and the respect maybe it should get, and the conversations around that, because that's sort of where our kind of podcast really grew. I mean, it started with Teresa and I talking about Star Wars, and specifically, our love of Padme and Leia, and kind of finding common ground. But the animation's where we really kind of grew, right?
Yeah. No, it was because Rebels came out right at that time, and we had so much to talk about with Rebels, and then working in all those different arcs from Clone Wars and things as everything started to tie together. But Tricia, kind of introduce us into this conversation about animation based off of the article you found around the time that the Oscars came out.
This is so weirdly tied into Star Wars, because the article was written by Lord and Miller, who are known as the duo who were originally directing the Han Solo movie and then got removed or left, or however that happened, and stepped away from it. And it ended up being finished by Ron Howard. And for them, that was, was talk about getting kicked down in your teeth, and to end up not being able to do that. Known for the Lego movie, they were the producers on Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. And then the Oscars this year, there was an interesting incident where they had actresses come out who had all been associated with the role of a Disney princess. And they sort of did this little kind of, I don't even know. It just felt like really kind of mocking the way they played it out. It was their script where.
Well, they were introducing the Best Animated Feature Oscar. They framed it this way.
All these characters hold such a special place in our hearts because animated films make up some of our most formative movie experiences as kids.
So many kids watch these movies over and over
and over and over and over and over and over.
I see some parents out there know exactly what we're talking about. Here are the nominees for Best Animated Feature Film.
And then they went on to introduce, the 5 nominees and who had won. But I mean, that whole thing is very derogatory and demeaning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's just such a, it's so ingrained in Hollywood, that puts on the Oscars, that they didn't even think about how that would come off to the people who legitimately work very hard to tell their stories. They just aren't on, film. And this goes all the way back to the animated shorts were part of the Oscars in 1932. And it was always short films. And there was a struggle just to get recognized with, in that type of thing, to recognize storytelling on film. And they're like, we're telling stories on film. They're just not with a camera. We're hand drawing it. We're doing it our own specific way. And it was the first nomination for animated movie was Disney's Beauty and the Beast that lost to Silence and the Lambs. So that's, you guys, if you can think about that, that's all the way back in the, 91. That was the Renaissance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little Mermaid.
Yeah, 91.
Yeah. So, that was when the first kind of discussion where they really started to push to be recognized. And then there was sort of, I think, there was this fear when they did say, okay, we're going to have an animated feature division. Is that going to recognize them, or is it going to just give them excuse to give them their own little category and we don't have to recognize any other character? Like, we don't even have to recognize the actors for doing their role, because, you know, the best actor nominees and actress nominees are going to be, you know, the ones that are live action. It can't possibly be, you know, someone who is doing it in an animated way. So Lord and Miller wrote an op-ed in Variety to specifically discuss this issue and discuss how it was laid out. And I just want to open how they opened it. Framing the 5 Academy Award nominees for Best Animated Feature as a corporate product for kids that parents must begrudgingly endure could be dismissed as simply careless, but to those of us who have dedicated our lives to making animated films, that carelessness has become routine. The head of a major animation studio once told an assembly of animators that if we played our cards right, we would one day graduate to live action. Years later, an exec at another studio said a certain animated movie we made was so enjoyable that it reminded them of a real movie.
Yikes.
That's just, and see, okay, I just have so many problems with all of this. And I did a lot of research, you know, back when I was doing Disney Vault Talk about this whole Oscar thing and the animated thing. And I read a bunch of articles where the animated category kind of brought about because the movie people, quote unquote, live action movie people, started to get scared that animated movies were going to take over, you know, their categories. So I think that's part of it. And then also they shoved them over to the side into Best Animated Feature. You know, I mean, if they're going to do that, then why haven't they done Best Superhero category or whatever? Because clearly they're also moving anything that is fandom related or superhero or whatever gets put into this category as if they're not even worth nominating for those Best Picture films. I mean, we have Lord of the Rings won one, but Star Wars never won. And the only Star Wars movie that I can recall that was nominated for an Oscar was the original Star Wars for Best Picture. It was the only one. You know, it's like those films are only allowed to be given technical awards. And then the animated films, when they have their Best Animated category, it's also very rare that they get nominated in any other category for cinematography or for costumes or whatever. And that bothers me. I mean, a lot of times they get nominated for Best Song or for score,
right,
or whatever.
That's what I was going to say. That's the only category that isn't like segmenting things is the music categories, which is interesting. I'm not, but that's because animation, a lot of those movies are driven by the musical score more so than most, because the music has to be written before you see before you create the visuals. So I guess that makes sense that they're story driven.
Right. I mean, and apart from the awards, I think the awards is just the thing that kind of highlights it and brings it to the forefront. But you get this, it's just like this cultural thing, like they were saying with parents and all this stuff. I just don't understand where we got to that animation is only for kids, because the themes of some of these movies are not little kid themes. They're not at all. Encanto for sure is not. Frozen 2, my God, absolutely not.
That movie was confusing and complex for me.
or think about Inside Out, that essentially explained to you kind of how literally they broke down how your brain's going to work. And even, you know, people like to talk about, you know, high art is exploring things and breaking things down and analyzing and doing something daring, but to actually like tell a story and, you know, make your emotions and show sadness and joy and the story that they told with that. Like if you had said, oh, somebody's going to tell you a movie about that, you'd be like, what? And then when you see it, you're like, okay. And so I think the point is these things, the film is supposed to touch you, whatever that is. If it's a dark side you want to see, or if you want to explore whatever it is about human nature. But animation does that. I mean, all the way back to, you know, our most foundational animations, whether it's Bambi or The Little Mermaid or whatever it was that jumped somebody in. It sparked something in you. It mattered. So if it matters to kids, why is that a bad thing? And there are plenty of parents that we see, especially in social media these days, that will willingly watch these movies and sing the songs, and they go to the Frozen sing along at Disney and sing all the songs with their kids. So I think they're okay.
Yeah. So there was another part in that article, and I'm just going to read it, where they said, animated films routinely demonstrate excellence in photography, design, costumes, and performance. They are some of the most carefully and cinematically directed films of the year. They have some of the most intricate scoring and sound design. They are also hits. When broadcasters bemoan the fact that so many of the nominated films have not been widely seen, they must be forgetting that animated nominees like from this year, Luca, Raya and the Last Dragon, and The Mitchells versus the Machines were 3 of the 10 most streamed movies of 2021, and 7 of the 10 most streamed movies were animated.
Yeah.
It's like, hello. And guaranteed it's not just kids that are streaming these movies.
Right.
Raising my hand right now.
I know. Yeah. We're all waving our hands.
But something that I thought was interesting when I was reading this stuff is I remembered that there was a film back a couple years ago is what I was thinking. And I couldn't remember what it was. So I had to go look it up. But it was Parasite in 2019. They won the Best Picture category, but they also won Best International Feature Film.
Wow.
And that's like the first time that anything like that has happened. So why can't that happen with an animated film? Why can't they win Best Animated Feature Film and win Best Picture if they truly are the best picture, regardless of whether it's animated or live action? Back in 2009 and 2010, Up was 2009. They were nominated in both categories. And in 2010, Toy Story 3 was nominated in both categories. But that's the last time that ever happened. Was in 2010.
Wow, that's interesting. Also, there's some other points that this article brings up, which is that 13 of the 50 highest grossing films of all time are animated. And that's 25% of the top 50 films, which, I mean, that's a big number.
Frozen, Encanto. I think Encanto's up there. I'm not 100% sure, but I know Frozen is.
And even if you think about it, even Avatar is a lot of animation of a different, and we're talking about those coming back out with more movies. There's film, but almost all of the story is CGI. So it's still people making decision to animate things as opposed to the live performance that you're used to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mary Poppins, it's part animation, part live action, and it was good enough to be nominated for Best Picture. So what's the problem? I just don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we were just talking earlier about how many animated films are made for everyone. And one of the things I think of is a lot of the animated shorts that like Pixar does or Disney does. They're usually done with animation and sound, not a lot of dialogue. And you can tell a complete emotional story with just that. Also, Dear Basketball, it's not just music, but it's the poem that Kobe Bryant wrote about his love letter to basketball. And he commissioned an animation to this poem as he read it with music by John Williams. Like that is just such a moving animated short. It's amazing. And it's not for kids, it's for everyone really, but especially adults.
And then also, I mean, we can start tying this into Star Wars, but one of the best storytellers in Star Wars started with animation, and still his passion is, and because he said so in interviews, is still the animated medium. Dave Filoni. I mean, like all in all, he's told more Star Wars stories than everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a big point too, is that George Lucas, who fancied himself an indie filmmaker, when he decided to go back and tell more stories, and he really wanted to tell stories on TV, but he needed to figure out a way to learn how to do that. He chose to do it through animation. And now with the Clone Wars, there's this enormous volume of work that exists in Star Wars that's more enormous than the movies. That's possible that there are more fans that came in from animation than any other time period, because it stretched out and it kept going. And you always see people who are like, oh, I just started to check out the Clone Wars and they're awesome, including Hayden Christensen, who's doing research for his role.
Exactly.
To play Darth Vader. So
that is so cool.
I think some of the most impactful stories from Star Wars that we get really deep and into the nitty-gritty and really interesting have come from Rebels and Clone Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've talked about it before, but they have so much time to tell those stories, when they have a season of 26 episodes or whatever it is, and they take that time and tell that whole story. And it's like, in some ways, Rebels for me is better than some of the films.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would rather watch Rebels than some of the films that we've gotten. And I'm not talking about prequel or original trilogy. And I like all the movies, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, so let's go around and so we're talking about animation as cinema, and let's go around and tell like maybe any aha moments we had about this particular thought that animation is cinema, if we have them, because I know some people don't have any kind of prejudice about that, but like I actually did. So you know what? I'll share my journey. So basically, when I was young, like any kid, you're always into animated films. I was totally into them. I grew up in the Disney Renaissance, like you, Teresa. So all those films, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, they hit me at the exact right age. And then I went through this like teenage period when I was in high school of stepping back from Disney and being like, oh, that's kid stuff. And I didn't see like Pocahontas or Mulan or Tarzan, like all that through 96 through 99 in the theaters, because I was like not into it. In fact, but I did see Anastasia and I loved Anastasia, but it wasn't until college, when I came out to college and was at USC. So I was right next to Disney, and I became friends with a group who we would go to Disneyland on the weekends, that I fell in love with Disney and the films again. And so that was part of my journey about animation. Also in the 90s, I felt like films were like, watching a movie was like my favorite thing to do with my family. Like my parents were workaholics, and I would always be the one to be like, hey guys, we're stopping and we're watching a movie. Like I'd just be the comfort zone person. And so I just loved movies, any movies above all else. But since then, and really since I saw, I would say, Breaking Bad and like the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, I've really shifted to not only appreciate animation more, but also TV series in general. And I know we've talked about this on some previous episodes or even fangirl chats or fangirl Zooms, but I love that we're getting these Disney Plus TV series that are telling this whole story. Going back to Obi-Wan Kenobi series, how it's a 6-part event, it's not a film that's 2.5 hours. It's going to be 6 hours or something close to that. So yeah, it's taken me probably 25-30 years to really put animation on the same pedestal that I did films when I was a teenager. So yeah, that's my journey.
And all of that's really interesting to me, because I guess I just kind of grew up different. One of the biggest things with my mom and I was when a new Disney movie would come out, it didn't matter how old I was, she would get me out of school the day that the movie came out, and we would go see the very first showing. And she was actually mentioning that the other day about how we can't really do that anymore, because I have a job. But she misses doing that. And, so it's one of those things. It's like, it's always been on the same level for me. And I think in a lot of cases, I tend to gravitate towards watching animated movies more than I'll turn on a live action movie. When you put something on in the background, right? Like my immediate go-tos is usually doing like putting in a Disney movie or something like that, or an animated movie of some sort. So for me, it wasn't necessarily the same, but where I did have a moment was TV and movies and putting them at the same level. Because for me, TV series, a lot of the TV series I watched that were animated were things like Rocko's Modern Life and Our Real Monsters and Hey Arnold. Those are all the Nickelodeon shows. Or there was puppet type shows. If I think about it, the first TV series that was animated that for me was on the same level, and I had to rent it from Blockbuster because it wasn't on TV anymore, was the Care Bears and the Popples. Care Bears and Popples. And when I went to Blockbuster, everybody else got movies, and I got the VHS that was like 3 episodes of Care Bears.
Nice.
Care Bears are the best.
40th anniversary right now, which is a crazy.
I think my journey appreciating animation started really when I started diving into writing about the hero's journey, which, you guys know has unfolded over the years with Fangirl blog and then my Hyperspace Theories podcast that we do there, where we talk about storytelling, writing for the Star Wars Insider. And a lot of that was shaped from looking at Star Wars, which got me into, if you do Star Wars, then you have to know Campbell, and then you go from Campbell to Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, which is like the most foundational book on screenwriting that there is in film. So I'm saying film, how Hollywood sees themselves as film. And where he got his start, he was professor, and he wrote this 7-page memo that was sort of a myth going around Hollywood. In the late 80s, early 90s, there was this memo on how to tell stories in the way of film. And it was called A Practical Guide to a Hero with 1,000 Faces. And the problem with Campbell's model is that it was too big for film, and because it more looked at books. So then he writes this memo, and then he's in the mix when they're making The Lion King. And that
Which Lion King?
The first one.
Oh, okay.
The animated version. So this is now considered the book, the memo, the way to think about creating any film in Hollywood. He has the steps, and he does say you should break the steps, you should know the rules and break them and all that kind of stuff. But it's really, if you look at so many movies, it's already there. And the first movie that they made that proved the model was The Lion King. And it has all those steps. And then if you look at any animated movie since then, they really follow those steps. But when we talk in our groups about, our Facebook groups, or when we're talking on our Zoom chats about these like Marvel stories, the Star Wars TV shows, that model is always showing up, even in a story that's supposed to be sort of like experimental, like Moon Knight, that goes in a different place. You can really break it down to that model that he did, that he proved in animation. And I think it's really crazy that the time that Jon Favreau now, who is the showrunner on The Mandalorian and the writer, he proved that you could do this blockbuster again. He chose to do it with The Lion King again, which is a trusted story that people of any age can look at and understand and internalize that model. And how crazy is that? So animation is important to the things that Hollywood does with their live action films.
Right.
Yeah, I just wish that Hollywood would get on board with things and stop trying to categorize stuff into little boxes, and just be like, what, animation is part of what we do. It's a film, it's cinema. And I mean, and that even goes into wages for people. I mean, it was mentioned in some of the articles we read. I mean, the animators, they didn't stop working during the pandemic. All the live action people had to stop. but the animators didn't have to. They went home, they got their computers, and they were working from home. And that's why during the pandemic, we still had all of these animated movies and new content still coming out because they were able to do it. And I mean, like, Hollywood owes them.
Well, yeah, because movie studios had to rely on their animated divisions.
Yeah, the movie studios, they owe their animated divisions big time. Big time.
For sure, especially to keep going. And I think that's where maybe a little bit of the hurt comes from when you're an animator and you see kind of you're portrayed that way. I wanted to talk real quick about how I think this mindset actually affected Star Wars, since that's what we talk about. When George Lucas first sold Star Wars and Lucasfilm and passed it on to Disney, he gave them his Padawan. He gave them Dave Filoni, but he was from animation. And we know now, looking back at things and how it progressed and knowing who were the key figures, Dave Filoni was giving his input, but he wasn't on the brain trust. Like he could see things and comment. And most importantly, he was the one who said, and this was revealed in The Art of Rise of Skywalker, he asked in a post The Force Awakens kind of discussion about where we're going, isn't the problem that Kylo has killed his father? And the reason George Lucas didn't show Anakin killing Padme was because it was a step too far. And so Filoni asked the right question. He's like, if we want to bring him back, like, how do we do that? And he said at the time, the only way I think we could do that is if we brought Leia into the equation. And, if it's an arc where it matters to Leia, then maybe you can see why that bringing Kylo back is. And I think that's the kind of the biggest flaw of The Rise of Skywalker is it's Kylo turning around isn't really earned in the story. It just happens. And as opposed to in Return of the Jedi, it really matters because it matters to Luke, not so much that it matters to Darth Vader, and Luke's the protagonist. So it's just this weird way that, you see, if he had been allowed and I just don't think he was respected as much as he should have been initially, if he had been allowed to have a real voice, because I think they didn't really listen to him as much as they could have, that Star Wars might have been a little bit stronger for it.
I would have to agree. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And going back to that turning point for me where I just felt that animation superseded film, I mean, it has to be Star Wars Rebels season 2 finale, Twilight of the Apprentice. Like seeing those two part 1, part 2 episodes in the theater, I think that is the best Star Wars we have. And that is written and directed by Dave Filoni and Henry Gilroy. But Dave Filoni was very much involved in that. He showed us images of his artwork for that. Like, just cinematically, it's like the best Star Wars out there. It's just incredible on a story level, on an artistic level, everything.
Yeah. And, you can see Dave's hand in like some of the directors that they got with The Mandalorian, and specifically Deborah Chow and Bryce Dallas Howard. I mean, those two have produced some of the best episodes of Star Wars that we have seen since like Twilight of the Apprentice. And that's a lot of that goes to, I mean, I'm convinced of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, like Dave's influence, because it just feels, you can feel Dave's hand in things once you've absorbed enough Star Wars content. And so you can feel it. And
like the Force.
Yeah. Specifically like with Bryce, like, and when she talks on some of those making ofs and stuff like that, like she gets it. She actually gets it versus what you hear from some of, when the others talk, they don't get it as much. And yeah.
Yeah. I think Bryce is what I think we've had the opportunity to talk to Dave Filoni a lot. So we know him as a storyteller who's very willing to listen to people. And I think Bryce is empathic that way and sympathetic. And Deb Cho is just really, I think she's strong, and I think she had a trust from working on The Mandalorian that Dave and John had a sense, and more so, I mean, I always say they did a lot with Kenobi and managed to not run the tread off that tire. You know, if you use a character too much, you run the risk of wearing them out and making them less valuable. And there's a lot of Kenobi, and we didn't lose that love of Kenobi. I feel like for a lot of us, the animation made us love him even more, even though he makes a lot of mistakes, and he makes mistakes by Anakin. We never lose sight of how much he cared for him, and that sometimes you can care and still make mistakes and still make him a realized human being, that not strip his humanity by telling that story of how Anakin fell.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of wrap all of this up with a sign of kind of sharing our top animated films and whether or not we think any of these would make it into like our top 10 films of all time. So I'm just going to run through like my favorites. I said 3, and then Tricia didn't put 3. So then I was like, okay, well, I'll add more. And it, so
it's the Teresa rule, expand the numbers.
Rule. So, and I put them just in the order that they came up in my head. So Encanto, Lion King, Moana, Frozen 2, Anastasia, Land Before Time, and Cars.
So how many is that top 3? How many?
3, 4, I don't know. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, sure, 7.
It works. It's hard. It was really hard to choose even 4 for me. So I get it. I mean, Encanto, what a story about trauma. I mean, to see that, and it just blows your socks off. And, we mentioned Lion King already, and Moana. I mean, I can't not watch that movie. When it's on, I watch it. It's just so beautiful, and just and with Frozen 2 and Moana and Encanto, which ones you're speaking to, Teresa, we're talking about a lot of inclusion there, right?
And also a lot of drama. Let's just like all of my favorite films include crazy amounts of drama. Let's see, Encanto, Lion King, his dad dies. Moana, she's losing everything. Frozen 2, depression. Anastasia loses her whole family. Land Before Time, his mom dies. Mm-hmm. Cars is probably the only one where nobody dies.
Yeah.
So Tricia, what are yours?
Well, you had Frozen 2, so that let me pick Frozen, which I think is just, foundational for me as far as, Let It Go is the song that hit my heart, and everything they built on that story. It was originally going to be a story about opposing forces, and there's no real antagonist in the story. It's just being who you are is the antagonist. And it changed really how Disney thought about telling stories, as opposed to having something that you have to be. I put Howl's Moving Castle just because that was the first Studio Ghibli animation that I saw. So to me, it was so impactful. I'm like, And the reason I watched it was because they inspired that in an episode of Star Wars Rebels. And I was like, oh, I need to go watch this stuff, And then I just had to keep going. And if you watch those movies, they're taking on huge themes like, nature versus, in industry and Princess Mononoke. I mean, just huge themes. They're not ducking anything on those. And they're just amazing, amazing films. So if you haven't checked any of those out, you should. If they come into movie theater near you, you should go and see it in the movie theater, because that's the way to see them. And then I put Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse because I think that's near perfect script, and it was rewarded for that. And then I put Up. It was hard to pick a Pixar film, but I don't know. There's something about Up. I think the older you get too, the more you watch it, that the older you get, the more it means to you. And that's all I'll say.
Okay. So Tricia, you mentioned Frozen, and you mentioned why you love that story, which is about the women being yourself. And that's the antagonizing factor. Can you imagine, and Multiverse of Madness spoilers, but like can you imagine if they had done that with Scarlet Witch, made her basically an Elsa character instead of what they did? Like, that's all I'll say here. But oh my God, I just got chills thinking about how that could have been rewritten. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Haven't seen it.
Yeah, I know. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. All right. So my 3/4 would be Tangled. That is, of course, my formative, well, not formative, but like the movie I fell in love with because it had all the elements of everything that I needed in a story. And which is, of course, you got the adventure, you got the romance, and you've got amazing characters, and you put them all together and it pops out just my favorite story ever.
And you have Maximus.
And you have Maximus, yes. The
Can't leave
scoundrel,
Maximus out of
scoundrel,
Tangled.
the princess, Maximus, it's all together. And the sidekick, right? And then Beauty and the Beast would have to be on my list because, once again, a romance. So we're getting this. So Teresa, yours are all about trauma movies. Mine are all about romance movies.
Well, not the next two.
No, I know it's not. But I mean, these are the two that are probably the top. That would be in my top 10 list. Tangled and Beauty and the Beast. Then I have to give a huge shout out to Fantasia, because what Walt Disney and the studios did with this film by putting picture to music in such a fantastic way. They gave story, they breathed a story into these musical pieces that already probably had a story in your head, but they just realized that on screen. And I thought that was beautiful. And then another special shout out to Zootopia, because that's not a romance, but it is like a heist movie and a specific genre of film that you wouldn't think would be in animation. And yet they did an incredible job with animating this with the cutest characters ever, Nick and Judy. And now I gotta go hug them. I gotta go hug them at Disneyland. Oh my God. Okay. All right. So those are mine.
So would any of these movies actually make it into your top 10 films of all time?
Tangled and Beauty and the Beast would. Yes.
Tricia?
Frozen and Into the Spider-Verse for sure. And it's hard because there's any day I could pick 4 other movies.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm. So for me, it would be probably Lion King and Land Before Time.
Yeah.
Just because Land Before Time,
it's so cute,
was ahead of its time, for lack of a better phrase. It was just so far ahead of its time. I think it was a classic for kids my age, but I don't think it's as appreciated as it should be. Land Before Time and An American Tale, both of those I feel like deserve more. They deserve more accolades than they got.
Well, and Land Before Time was executive produced by
George Lucas
and Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, it was a George Lucas, Steven Spielberg collaboration.
Yep. So I mean, it's interesting that you were like, okay.
Well, if you guys want to join in this conversation with us and let us know what you think, you can find us over at fangirlsgoingrogue.com. You can also reach us on social media at FG Going Rogue. Tricia is at Fangirl Cantina. I am at Ice Cold Penguin. Sarah is at Jedi Tink, and Sandra is at Geek Chic 9.
You can leave us a voicemail 33121 Ewoks. That's 331-213-9657. Or send us an email, contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com.
Also, you can find us on Facebook. Just search Facebook for Fangirls Going Rogue. You can like the page or join the group. And either way, that is where we post where our Zoom links to our discussions most weeks.
Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. There will not be ones back until Kenobi, but they will be back. Please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews so more people can find us.
So before we say until next time, this is the special announcement that we teased on our show. So Teresa, would you like to talk a little bit?
Yeah. So Yub Cubs, I wanted to make sure that I took some time to come on and talk to you guys I am officially retiring from all podcasting. If you've kept up with me at all, you know that I've already left Star Wars Bookworms and all the other shows that I do. This was the last one that I was doing. My life has just really changed a lot since the pandemic. My priorities have shifted. The things that I need to dedicate my time to have shifted. And I think one of the biggest things, I want to mention it just because I think a lot of people have been dealing with this, but my mental health situation has been a roller coaster. And it is just time for me to take a different path in my life. And I am super sad to go. And I'm going to miss everybody. I'm going to miss working with Tricia and Sarah and Sandra so closely. I'm still going to be around, so I'm not disappearing. I'm just not going to be a part of the podcast anymore. I want to say thank you, though. I feel really blessed to have been a part of this. I want to thank Tricia for bringing me onto the project and asking me to do this with her. Sarah, I want to thank you for coming in and just adding so much value to the show with everything that you do, all of the editing and the visuals and the sound and all of our graphics and everything else. I mean, you do so much stuff behind the scenes. I don't think people really know how much you do. I've made a lot of great friends. I've had a lot of really awesome opportunities, but it's time for me to go a different direction. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that to you guys, but I will still be in our Facebook group. I'll still be on all my social medias. I will still be around. I'll still be posting Star Wars stuff. I've actually been waiting to make this announcement and for this episode to come out before I do a ColourPop Star Wars collection makeup review. I wanted this stuff to come out first before I do that. But yeah, so I will still be around and doing stuff. It's just time. It's time. It's been 9 years, almost.
Wow.
9 years. Well, it's definitely been 9 years of Fangirls Going Rogue, but which really annoys me that I didn't get to 10 just off of the OCD factor.
You can count the Fangirl chat covering when we were the original YouTube channel before anybody did YouTube, and then we went to podcasting, and everybody's back to YouTube. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, so anyway, I'll be around.
And we hope you join us sometimes for the Zoom chats as well, like the Zoom discussions. It'll be fun to have you pop in there as well. So thank you, Teresa, and we love you.
There's nothing wrong with change. It feels hard, but then something better comes from it always. That's the reason we have stories and animated shows and animated film and regular film to help us see how change can make us stronger and better. So we love you.
Love you guys too. And I love our Yub Cubs.
Yes. So until next time, do. Yub. 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 Yub.